I've always been clumsy. Not in a cute, endearing way that romantic comedies make it seem, but in a genuinely disruptive, why did God make me like this kind of way? So when I rounded the corner of Bean and Brew Cafe with my scalding hot Americano and collided straight into what felt like a brick wall wearing Armani, I wasn't even surprised. Just mortified. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. The words tumbled out of my mouth as I watched the brown liquid spread across the pristine white shirt of possibly the most beautiful man I'd ever seen in my 24 years of existence. I expected anger. Maybe some yelling. I'd ruined what was clearly a shirt that cost more than my monthly rent. Instead, he laughed. Actually laughed, this warm, genuine sound that made something flutter stupidly in my chest. Don't worry about it, he said, looking down at the stain with an amused smile. His voice was like honey, smooth and sweet and entirely too dangerous for my poor Omega heart. Actually, this gives me an excuse to see you again. You owe me a new shirt, right? I blinked up at him, still holding my now half-empty cup. What? I'm Cha Juno, he extended his hand, completely ignoring the fact that his shirt was literally dripping coffee onto the cafe floor. And you are? Kong Saiwoo, I managed, shaking his hand. His grip was warm and firm, and he held on just a second longer than necessary. And I really am sorry. I can pay for the dry cleaning or... How about dinner instead? His smile widened, revealing a dimple on his left cheek that should probably be illegal. Tomorrow night? You can make it up to me then. That's how it started. One coffee-stained shirt and a smile that made me forget how to breathe properly. Juno pursued me like I was the only person who existed in his world. The next day, there were flowers waiting at my desk at the design studio where I worked. White roses with a note that simply said, "Looking forward to tonight. Jay." My coworker Hannah practically swooned when she saw them. "Who is he?" she demanded, hovering over my shoulder as I sniffed the roses like an idiot. "Just someone I met," I said, trying to play it cool and failing miserably. "We're having dinner tonight." Dinner turned into a late-night walk along the Han River. The walk turned into getting coffee at 3 in the morning because neither of us wanted the night to end. Coffee turned into him kissing me on my doorstep as the sun started to rise, soft and sweet and perfect. For 2 weeks, I floated through life in a haze of text messages and surprise lunch dates and phone calls that stretched until my phone battery died. Juno was attentive in a way I'd never experienced before. He remembered that I liked extra cream in my coffee. He'd send me photos of random things throughout the day. A funny sign, a cute dog, the sunset, with messages like, "Thought of you." I was falling. Hard and fast and completely out of control. Then came the gallery opening. My company had been hired to design the promotional materials for a contemporary art exhibition, and my boss insisted I attend the opening night. I tried to convince Juno to come with me, but he said he had a family thing he couldn't get out of. So I went alone, nursing a glass of wine that was too expensive for me to actually enjoy, trying not to feel out of place among all these wealthy art collectors in their designer clothes. That's when I felt it. The weight of someone's gaze on me, heavy and intense. I turned, and across the crowded gallery, a man was staring at me. He looked eerily similar to Juno, the same sharp jawline, the same height, but everything else was different. Where Juno was warm, this man was ice. His eyes were cold and calculating, and the way he looked at me made me feel like a specimen under a microscope. He started walking toward me, cutting through the crowd with the kind of confidence that came from never being told no in his entire life. "Kong Saiwoo," he said when he reached me. Not a question. A statement. My heart hammered in my chest. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" "Not yet." His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I'm Cha Miho. I've heard about you." The same last name as Juno. A coincidence? Before I could process this, I felt a familiar hand on my lower back. "Hyung." Juno's voice had lost all its usual warmth. "What are you doing here?" I looked between them, my brain struggling to catch up. The resemblance was uncanny now that they were standing side by side. "You two know each other?" "He's my brother," Juno said, his hand tightening slightly on my back. Something possessive in the gesture. "My older brother." "Triplet, actually," Miho corrected, his cold eyes never leaving my face. along with our youngest brother, Daeho. Has Juno mentioned us, SSI? The way he said my name felt invasive somehow, like he already knew more about me than he should. No, actually, I said, looking at Juno with confusion. 2 weeks of constant communication, and he'd never mentioned having brothers. Triplet brothers. It never came up, Juno said tightly. Miho's not smile widened. Well, it's a pleasure to finally meet you. I'm sure we'll be seeing much more of each other. After he walked away, I turned to Juno. What was that about? Nothing, he said quickly. Too quickly. Miho's just protective. Ignore him. But I couldn't ignore him. Because starting the next day, Miho was everywhere. At Bean and Brew, sitting in the corner with his laptop when I arrived for my morning coffee. Outside my office building, claiming he had a meeting nearby. At the bookstore I frequented on weekends. Each time, he'd strike up a conversation. Brief, polite, but always leaving me with this unsettled feeling. And always, he'd mention something that made me wonder, how did he know I liked this bookstore? How did he know I took my coffee with extra cream? Then 2 days later, I met the third triplet. I was at an art supply store, picking up some watercolors for a personal project, when someone behind me spoke. The cerulean blue is better than the navy. Trust me. I turned to find another man who shared that same face. Juno's face, Miho's face, but somehow entirely different. This one had paint stains on his fingers and an intensity in his eyes that made me take a step back. Okay, thanks, I said, reaching for the cerulean blue. You're an artist? He asked, tilting his head. Graphic designer, actually. This is just for fun. The best art always is. He smiled, and it was neither Juno's warmth nor Miho's coldness. It was something raw and real. I'm Day. Just Day. Not his full name. Not mentioning his brothers. We talked about art for over an hour, standing in that supply store aisle like we were the only two people in the world. He spoke about color theory and composition with such passion that I found myself completely captivated. Can I paint you sometime? He asked as we finally headed toward the checkout. My phone buzzed. A text from Juno. Miss you. Dinner tonight? I looked at Day, this stranger who didn't feel like a stranger at all, and ignored every logical thought screaming in my head. Yes, I said. I'd like that. I didn't know then that I'd just sealed my fate. That I was already tangled in something I couldn't escape. That all three of them were playing a game, and I was the prize. Life became a juggling act I never auditioned for. Juno was still my, boyfriend? We hadn't put a label on it, but we were exclusive. At least I thought we were. He'd mentioned wanting me to meet his family soon, which felt significant. Every morning started with his good morning text. Every night ended with his voice lulling me to sleep over the phone. But then there was Miho. He'd somehow acquired my work email, probably not hard for someone who clearly had resources, and started sending me business articles he thought I'd find interesting. Saw this and thought of you, the emails would say. Simple. Professional. Except they came at odd hours, like 2 in the morning, which made me wonder if he was thinking about me when he should have been sleeping. Then the gifts started arriving at my apartment. A first edition of my favorite novel with a card that read, Because you deserve beautiful things. A cashmere scarf in the exact shade of blue I'd once mentioned liking in a conversation I barely remembered having. How did he know these things? Your brother sent me another gift, I told Juno one evening over dinner. He'd gone very still, his chopsticks suspended halfway to his mouth. Miho? Yeah, it's getting kind of much. I'll talk to him. But the muscle ticking in his jaw told me this conversation wouldn't be pleasant. Juno, why didn't you tell me you had triplet brothers? He set down his chopsticks carefully. Honestly? Because my brothers and I have a complicated relationship. We're competitive about everything. Work, achievements, even stupid things like who can hold their breath longer. I wanted you to be mine. Something they couldn't touch. The possessiveness in his voice should have been a red flag. Instead, it made my stupid Omega heart flutter. What I didn't tell Juno was that I'd started going to Daeho's studio twice a week. The first session, I'd shown up at the address he'd given me, a converted warehouse in Yongsan that smelled like turpentine and rain. The space was chaos personified. Canvases everywhere, paint tubes scattered across every surface, classical music playing softly from a speaker somewhere. You came, Daeho said, sounding genuinely surprised. You asked me to. He studied me for a long moment, then gestured to a stool positioned near the window. Sit there. Natural light is better. For 2 hours, he painted while I sat there trying not to fidget. He didn't make small talk. Barely spoke at all, actually. But every so often, I'd catch him looking at me with this intensity that made my skin feel too tight. Can I see it? I asked when he finally set down his brush. No. He turned the canvas away. Not until it's finished. When will that be? When I understand you. The statement should have sounded pretentious. Instead, it felt like a promise. I kept going back. Tuesday and Thursday evenings became Daeho's time, though I told myself it was just modeling. Nothing wrong with that. I wasn't doing anything inappropriate. We barely even touched. But the way he looked at me felt more intimate than any kiss I'd shared with Juno. 3 weeks into this bizarre new normal, everything started colliding. Juno took me to Mingles, this exclusive restaurant in Gangnam where you needed reservations months in advance. I dressed up, a soft lavender sweater that Juno had once said brought out my eyes, my nicest jeans. We were halfway through the meal, Juno telling me about a difficult patient he'd treated that day, when I felt that familiar weight of someone's gaze. Miho sat 3 tables away with a group of men in expensive suits. Our eyes met across the restaurant, and he smiled, slow and knowing, like we were sharing a secret. He raised his wine glass slightly in acknowledgement. My heart did this uncomfortable flip. Saiwoo. Juno's voice pulled me back. You okay? Yes, sorry. Just thought I saw someone I knew. He glanced over his shoulder and froze. Of course he's here. It's a coincidence, I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. With Miho, nothing is ever a coincidence. The meal felt ruined after that. Juno was distracted, kept glancing over at his brother's table. I picked at my food, appetite gone. When we left, Miho was waiting by the valet stand. Fancy seeing you here, little brother, he said smoothly. Sai was this you look beautiful tonight. Thanks, I mumbled, uncomfortable with the way Juno tensed beside me. We're leaving, Juno said coldly, grabbing my hand. Of course. Enjoy your evening. But Miho's eyes stayed on me as we walked away, and I felt them like a physical touch. The following Thursday, I arrived at Daeho's studio to find him in a mood I couldn't quite read. He was mixing paints aggressively, his movements jerky and frustrated. Bad day? I ventured. You could say that. I settled onto my usual stool, but he didn't pick up his brush. Just stood there, staring at his palette like it had personally offended him. My phone buzzed. A text from Juno. Where are you? Wanted to surprise you with dinner. My stomach dropped. I typed quickly, at home, not feeling well. Rain check. The lie came too easily. When I looked up, Daeho was watching me with an unreadable expression. What? I asked, defensive. You're seeing someone. It wasn't a question. I considered lying again but couldn't under that penetrating stare. It's complicated. Is it my brother? The world tilted. What? Juno. He set down his palette with deliberate care. Are you dating Juno? The brush I'd been nervously fiddling with clattered to the floor. How do you? My brain caught up. You're the 3rd triplet. He nodded slowly, something pained crossing his features. And Miho's been circling you too, hasn't he? I felt sick. The room was suddenly too small, too hot. Did you know who I was when we met? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Daeho. Did you know? Yes. The single word felt like a knife. I stood up so fast the stool toppled over. So what, this was all what? Some kind of game. It started that way, he admitted quietly. But Saiwoo. Don't. My hands were shaking. I trusted you. All of you. And you've been, what? Comparing notes? Laughing about the stupid Omega who fell for it. It's not like that. Then what is it like, Daeho? Tears were burning in my eyes now, and I hated myself for it. Explain to me how 3 brothers all accidentally became interested in the same person. Explain the coincidences. He stepped toward me and I backed away. There was a bet, he said, and those 4 words shattered something inside me. At our mother's birthday dinner 6 weeks ago. We were drunk and stupid, and we made a bet about who could make someone fall for them first. It wasn't supposed to be you specifically. Just whoever we met next. Then Juno spilled coffee on you and... I didn't wait to hear more. I grabbed my bag and ran. Behind me, I heard him call my name, but I didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Because the 3 men I'd been falling for had turned my heart into the prize of a game I never knew I was playing. I blocked all 3 of them that night. Juno's number, Miho's emails, even Daeho's contact that I'd saved as just Dae, like an idiot. My finger hovered over each block button for only a second before pressing down with satisfying finality. Then I turned off my phone completely and cried myself to sleep on my bathroom floor because my bed still smelled like Juno's cologne. Hannah found me at my desk the next morning looking like death warmed over. Jesus, Sai, what happened? She set down a coffee on my desk, extra cream, the way I liked it, and the simple gesture made my eyes burn with fresh tears. Men are trash, I said eloquently. Okay, you're going to need to be more specific. So I told her everything. The coffee spill, the gallery encounter, the art studio sessions. The bet. By the end of it, she looked ready to commit murder. I'm going to kill them, she announced. All 3 of them. I'll make it look like an accident. Get in line. For 2 weeks, I threw myself into work with manic intensity. I redesigned our company's entire portfolio website even though nobody asked me to. I volunteered for every project, stayed late every night, came in early every morning. Anything to avoid going home to my apartment where their ghosts lingered in every corner. The flowers Juno had sent wilted in their vase. I couldn't bring myself to throw them out. Miho's gifts sat untouched in their elegant packaging, accusatory in their perfection. I'd shoved the art supplies from Daeho's studio into the back of my closet where I wouldn't have to look at them. My phone stayed off. I told myself I didn't care if they were trying to reach me. I cared. God, I cared so much it physically hurt. On day 15 of my self-imposed isolation, someone knocked on my apartment door at 11 at night. I considered ignoring it, pretending I wasn't home. But the knocking continued, persistent and patient, and something in my chest told me who it was before I even looked through the peephole. Daeho stood in my hallway looking like he'd been to hell and back. His hair was a mess, sticking up in every direction like he'd been running his hands through it constantly. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. Paint stained his clothes and hands, more than usual, like he'd been working nonstop for days. I know you don't want to see me, he said before I could slam the door. I know I don't deserve your time. But I need to show you something. Please, Sai, just please. Every logical brain cell I possessed screamed at me to shut the door in his face. To protect what was left of my shattered heart. I grabbed my jacket. We didn't speak during the taxi ride to his studio. The silence sat heavy between us, punctuated only by the sounds of the city rushing past the windows. Daeho kept his hands clasped tightly in his lap, like he was physically restraining himself from reaching for me. When we arrived at the warehouse, he unlocked the door with shaking hands. I haven't slept much, he said quietly, almost apologetically. I've been working. He pushed open the studio door, and I stepped inside. Then stopped breathing. The walls were covered in paintings. Not just covered, every available surface was filled with canvases of various sizes. And every single one was of me. Me laughing at something off canvas, my eyes crinkled at the corners. Me lost in thought, biting my lower lip the way I did when I was concentrating. Me looking out a window with afternoon light painting gold across my features. Me in profile in 3/4 view, straight on. Me happy, pensive, sad, hopeful. Dozens of versions of me, captured in oils and acrylics and watercolors. Each one intimate in a way that made my chest ache. This started as a bet. Daeho's voice came from behind me, rough and exhausted. 6 weeks ago, my brothers and I made a stupid, drunk decision to prove something meaningless to each other. We were competing like we always do, like we've done our entire lives. Everything is a competition with us. Who's more successful, who's smarter, who's more charming? I traced my fingers along the edge of a canvas, me sleeping, my face peaceful and vulnerable in a way that suggested he'd painted it from memory. When was this? I asked quietly. After our 4th session. You dozed off in the chair while I was mixing paints. I didn't wake you. I watched you sleep for 20 minutes and memorized every detail so I could paint it later. My throat tightened. I told myself I was observing a subject. That this was about technique and capturing human essence and all the pretentious artist bullshit I usually spout. He moved to stand beside me, careful not to touch. But somewhere between the first painting and the 50th, I realized I wasn't trying to win anymore. I was trying to understand why my heart broke every time you smiled at someone else. Especially my brothers. I turned to look at him. Really look at him. The exhaustion carved into his features, the paint under his fingernails, the way his hands trembled slightly. You painted 50 portraits of me? 63, actually. He gestured around the room. These are just the ones I kept. There were others I destroyed because they didn't capture you right. Didn't show the way your nose scrunches when you're confused, or how you tuck your hair behind your left ear more than your right, or, his voice cracked. Or how devastated you looked when you ran out of here 2 weeks ago. A tear slid down my cheek before I could stop it. You still lied to me. I did. You let me think this was real when it was just a game. It was real, he said fiercely. Maybe it didn't start that way, but every conversation we had, every moment in this studio, that was real, Saiwoo. The bet stopped matching after the first week. After you told me about how you got into design because your elementary school art teacher said you saw the world in colors other people missed. After you laughed at my terrible jokes about Caravaggio. After, he stopped, swallowed hard. After I realized I was falling in love with you. The words hung in the air between us, fragile and terrifying. Don't, I whispered. Don't say that. But, because it makes this harder? It's already hard, Saiwoo. I haven't painted anything else in 2 weeks. Every canvas I start turns into your face. My brothers aren't speaking to me because I told them the bet was off, that I wouldn't compete for you like you were some prize. They know you told me? He nodded. I called them after you left. Told them I'd ruined everything, that you knew about the bet. Juno showed up here and punched me. Miho just looked at me like I was the biggest disappointment in his life. Which, fair. I moved to another painting. This one showed me from behind, looking at a canvas, my posture suggesting complete absorption. The detail was incredible. He'd captured the exact way I stood, weight on one hip, head tilted just so. I don't know what to do with this, I admitted quietly. I don't know how to process that all three of you, the words stuck in my throat. I'm not asking you to forgive me. Daeho's voice was soft behind me. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to see this. To understand that you weren't just part of a bet to me. You became the thing I didn't know I was looking for. Someone who saw past the competition, past the triplet labels, and just saw me. I wiped at my eyes angrily. I need to go. Okay. I need time to think. I understand. At the door I paused. Daeho. Yeah. Did you mean it? That you're in love with me? The silence stretched for 3 heartbeats. Every brushstroke, he said finally. Every single one. I left without looking back, but I carried those 63 paintings with me, imprinted on my heart like scars I'd never fully heal from. They say the heart wants what it wants, but what happens when it wants everything? I spent 3 days staring at my ceiling, replaying every interaction with the Cha triplets like some kind of masochist. Every text from Juno that had made me smile. Every knowing look from Miho that had made my pulse quicken. Every quiet moment in Daeho's studio where words weren't necessary. My phone stayed off. I called in sick to work. Hannah dropped off food that I barely touched and threats to hunt down those bastards that I appreciated but didn't encourage. On the 4th day, someone slipped an envelope under my door. I recognized Miho's handwriting immediately, precise, controlled, elegant. Of course his handwriting would be perfect. Inside was a single sheet of expensive cardstock with an address and a time. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Please come. I shouldn't have gone. Every self-preservation instinct I possessed told me to stay home, to protect what was left of my broken heart, to move on with my life and forget the Cha triplets ever existed. I went anyway. The address led me to a private room in a tea house in Buckshin, the traditional kind with floor seating and paper screens. Miho sat alone at the low table, 2 cups already poured. He stood when I entered, and I noticed the usual sharp perfection of his appearance was slightly off. His tie was loosened. His hair wasn't quite as perfectly styled. "You came," he said, and there was genuine surprise in his voice. "I'm leaving if this is some kind of ambush." "It's not. It's just me. Please, sit." I sat, keeping the table between us like a barrier. He settled across from me, those calculating eyes softer than I'd ever seen them. "I approached you strategically," he said without preamble. Typical Miho, no small talk, straight to the point. "After Juno mentioned meeting someone at the cafe, I looked you up. Social media, work portfolio, everything. I studied what you liked, where you went, what made you happy. I calculated my moves like a business acquisition." My hands clenched in my lap. "That's really creepy, you know that?" "I know." He looked down at his tea. "I've built my entire life on strategy and control. Everything is a calculation, a move on a chessboard. It's how I became CEO at 25. It's how I've always beaten my brothers at everything. So I was just another win? That's what I told myself." He finally met my eyes, and I saw something raw there. Something vulnerable that didn't fit with the ice-cold businessman persona. "But here's what I didn't calculate, how it would feel when you looked at me like I actually mattered. Not as a CEO or the eldest triplet or some strategic player. Just as Miho. As a person." He reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone, turning it to show me the screen. It was open to our email thread, all the articles he'd sent, all my responses. "I have a folder on my computer labeled Saiwu," he admitted quietly. "It has 97 documents. Articles I thought you'd like. Restaurants I wanted to take you to. Conversations I wanted to have with you. I'd spend hours researching things you were interested in just so I could talk to you about them intelligently. That's still manipulation." "It is," he agreed. "But somewhere in all that research, I stopped trying to figure out how to win you over and started just wanting to know you. Really know you. The you that existed beyond data points and social media posts." He paused. "I've never wanted that before. With anyone." I didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to reconcile this honest, vulnerable Miho with the cold strategist who'd been orchestrating encounters. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "For treating you like a conquest. For the bet. For not being brave enough to just approach you as myself instead of as some carefully calculated version of what I thought you wanted." Before I could respond, there was a soft knock on the door. Juno entered, and my heart clenched painfully at the sight of him. He looked terrible, like he hadn't slept in days. There was a fading bruise on his jaw that I suspected came from Daiho. "Saiwu," he breathed my name like a prayer. "Thank you for coming." "What is this?" I looked between them. "I thought Miho said." "I lied," Miho said. "We needed to talk to you. All of us. Together." The door opened again, and Daiho stepped in, completing the set. The three of them together was overwhelming. Same face, same height, but entirely different energies. Juno's warmth, Miho's intensity, Daiho's raw honesty. They were all looking at me like I was the only thing that mattered in the world. "This isn't fair," I said, voice breaking. "You can't all just." "We know," Juno cut me off. He moved to sit beside Miho, maintaining distance from me. "We know this isn't fair. None of this has been fair to you." Daiho remained standing, leaning against the wall. "We've been fighting," he said quietly, "for 2 weeks. About you, about the bet, about everything." Juno threw the first punch. I threw the second. Miho threatened to fire us both from the family company. "I didn't actually mean that," Miho muttered. "The point is," Juno continued, pulling a folded paper from his pocket, "we've been so busy competing with each other that we forgot what actually matters." He slid the paper across the table to me. "I wrote you a letter. Because I couldn't trust myself to say this out loud without crying." My hands shook as I unfolded it. Juno's handwriting was messier than Miho's, rushed and emotional. I've been the charming one my whole life. The one who makes people laugh, who puts everyone at ease, who knows exactly what to say. It's a role I perfected because being a triplet means you need something that makes you stand out. But with you, for the first time, I didn't want to perform. That first morning after we stayed up until sunrise, I told you about my patient who died last year. The one I couldn't save. I've never told anyone that story. Not even my brothers. You made me want to be real instead of charming. And that terrified me. So I held on too tight and lost you anyway. Meeting you was the first time something in my life felt unscripted. Not part of the competition, not part of the role I play. Just real. I'm sorry I ruined that. I'm sorry I let my ego and my need to beat my brothers turn something genuine into a game. I love you. Not the strategic version Miho calculated, not the artistic version Daiho painted. Just you, exactly as you are. No. I set down the letter with trembling hands. All three of them were watching me with identical expressions of hope and fear. We're calling off the bet, Miho said. There's no winner. We all lost. We lost you, Juno added, and his voice cracked on the words. And we lost each other, Daiho finished, looking at his brothers with something like regret. We let competition poison something that should have been about connection. I took a shaky breath, trying to organize the chaos of emotions in my chest. Anger, hurt, longing, confusion, all tangled together until I couldn't separate one from another. You three need to figure your own mess out first, I said finally. Whatever this is between you, the competition, the resentment, the need to constantly one-up each other, you need to fix that. Actually fix it, not just put a band-aid on it because of me. And then, Juno asked softly, and then, maybe we can talk. All of us. Honestly this time. No games, no strategies, no bets. Miho's eyes widened. You mean? I'm not making any promises, I interrupted. I'm hurt. I'm angry. I don't know if I can trust any of you again. But, I looked at each of them in turn. But I'm not closing the door either. The hope that bloomed on their faces was almost painful to witness. We'll do better, Daiho said. I swear it. As I stood to leave, Daiho caught my hand gently. Saiwu? For what it's worth, you weren't just part of a bet. You became the thing we didn't know we were betting on. A chance at something real. I pulled my hand away, but not harshly. Prove it. I walked out of that tea house with my heart a mess of contradictions. 3 brothers, 1 Omega, and a choice that was never as simple as choosing just one. Because maybe, just maybe, my heart was big enough for all the complicated, messy, beautiful ways they'd learned to love me. But first, they had to learn to love each other again. And I had to figure out if I was brave enough to let them try.